Hey, how's it going, ninjas? You're watching Ninja Monkey Video School, video number 8. In this video, I'm going to go over how to add polish, which is basically going to be mixing your audio, um, color correcting your video, and then adding color grading to your video. So mixing the audio is basically making sure that your levels are good so that nothing is too loud or too low, so that basically the viewer can hear everything very well and everything is very clear. Color correction is basically going to be the process of fixing any problems that occurred during the shooting process. So if anything came out a little bit too dark or too bright, or if things maybe came out looking the wrong color, things like that, we would address that in the color correction process. And then color grading is going to be adding some style to our video. So instead of just making it look like the videos that came right out of the camera, we're going to be adding some style. And usually the style that I like to add is making things look a little bit more like film. Let's start with mixing our audio. Now, the first thing that you want to watch when you're mixing your audio, I'm going to turn off the audio just right now while I'm talking. The first thing you're going to want to watch is make sure that you have your audio meters here on the bottom right shown. The way to do that is to go Window, Show in Workspace, Audio Meters, or you can also Shift Command 8, as you can see right here. You want to make sure that these are shown. These audio meters are going to show you exactly the levels of your audio so that you make sure nothing is too loud or too soft. Now, when you're going through editing, you want to kind of always be looking at your audio meters. You want to make sure that your audio meters are kind of roughly where they need to be. In the beginning, it's not as important because you're going to be getting rid of a lot of the audio. But once you get a little bit closer to where we are now, most of the audio that we have here is going to actually be used. So right now, the only audio that we have is the music. And then at certain points, we have them speaking. Like you can see right here, we have extra audio come in. So we're basically I'm gonna show you how to do the music part and then how to mix in different parts of audio. When you wanna basically have them say something during the day, when you wanna have a story play out, things like that, you're gonna need to mix in the audio. So I'm gonna show you that. So let's zoom in right here. So right now, let's say I have it at -16. When you start off, you're gonna have it at 0. So everything is going to be right at 0. So I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. So let's have it play. I'm not going to actually have it so that you hear the audio, but you'll be able to look at the meters here on the right, the audio meters. So let's have it play. You see the audio meters are basically coming out, these zeros are coming out. That means that it's peaking. Once the 0 is basically the highest that audio should ever go. And let's go to 6 because this is more like how professional audio meters will work. Go to past to +6. But usually you never want anything peaking. That's the first rule that I want to teach you. And most audio meters will have this red to let you know what the highest the audio has gone. Right here it's telling me that the audio has gone up to 1. And then in this it has gone to 0. It's much too high. Now, when I was going through film school, this was kind of something that was never taught to me. Basically, they always told me never to have anything peaking, which is the first thing that you're pretty much taught when you become a film editor, not have anything peaking. Now, sound people are taught more to kind of keep everything right around -12. All of your main sounds should be -12. Your peaks will maybe go up to -6 at the highest, but you should mostly keep everything right around peaking, right around -12. Your average sounds, dialogue, things like that. You might have a sound effect, music go higher up to the -6, which will be basically would be considered your peaking level. But everything should be right around -12. If you ever bring in a professional movie, things like that, into your editing system and play them, everything's going to be right around -12. That's the industry standard. That's what I've been told by many sound people here in LA. It's very much what you want to be shooting for. Now, when you're recording, you want to be shooting for that as well. Record everything right at -12. So when things get brought into the editing suite, it's ready perfect. The editor doesn't have to mess around with it too much, move anything around. And then when it goes into audio mixing, you can go ahead and perfect that, and you have a perfect level to start off with. Now, a lot of times things like this get confused, the peaking, because in film and in music, there's two different beliefs of your levels. In film, we want to be at -12. We want everything to be easily heard by the viewer, nothing be too loud, nothing overpower the video. Now in music, they only have music, so they want the music to overpower everything else. When you're in the club, you want to only hear the music. When you're in the shopping mall, you want to only hear the music. So they shoot for negative, for zero. Is they push the peak, is what I've been heard by many sound engineers and things like that when they've talked to me. It's constantly about pushing zero. How close can you actually get to zero before actually going over? And these are anything that you hear on the music, on any music you hear on the radio, things like that. They're trying to push zero as close as they can get to zero without going over. And you can see in this mix specifically, Final Cut did tell me I did go to 1, so they did push it maybe too far in Final Cut's analysis of this audio. But it's fine as far as they're pushing it right to zero. As you can see, almost all sounds are going right to zero. Now when we're going to film, basically we want to go to make it go to negative 12, so I'm gonna have to lower it. So you could see before I had it mixed down to negative 12, you could see what it looked like before I had lowered it, before I had raised it back to zero. I have everything right around negative 11.6. That's what I've lowered it to get it to right to negative 12. All of my major sounds are right around there. I could show you how that'll kind of work. We'll go back up and kind of have it play. See, it's way too high. While it's playing, I'll lower it. And Final Cut lets you do kind of a nice real-time analysis of this. And we'll just kind of find our right spot. And negative 11 is a pretty good spot for us to be, right around negative 12. So that's pretty much how you want to make sure your levels are good. You do that for your audio of your music and your dialogue. And then basically when you're trying to mix in anything to the music, you're sometimes going to want to turn down the music when you're doing this. Here in this case, I just wanted to have some background sounds of them laughing and stuff like that, so I didn't turn down the music. You can see what it sounds like. And you could see, like, I didn't really want to be able to hear what they're saying. I didn't want to, oh, they're talking bad about someone or anything. The specifics of their audio is not very important. What I wanted to have was just the laughing, that kind of background ambience. We'll hear it again. You can kind of hear a little bit of laughing, them talking, things like that. Now in this section, I actually did turn down the audio of the music to be able to hear the audio of the dialogue a little bit better. Let's hear it before I kind of show you what I did. Now I basically wanted to, they were talking about the tie and how it didn't work out very well when they tried to do the tie, things like that. It's a funny thing that happened during the wedding day, so I always try to leave that stuff in. Now when I'm going to basically mix things in, I'm going to turn down the audio so you can hear me. When I'm going to mix things in, I always like using the range tool. That's going to be pressing R. Basically you press R on the key and you'll have the range tool. It looks yellow like you can see here. Yellow will go right underneath the cursor. And then I'll select the range of where I want to lower. So I want to lower it from the beginning of this audio to the end of the audio. And then basically I'll play it and just listen to it and see where I want to lower it to. Let's say if I want to hear it much more. That's basically what I would do, so I could basically hear it much more. Now it's much clearer what they're saying. Now my original edit, I didn't want it to be clear. That's why I had the music still very loud. But you could do this. And what I always suggest, because when you're using the range tool, I'm going to turn off the audio. When you're using the range tool, it always makes a very quick transition from the in to the out. So I always like to just kind of press shift and drag it over. When you're pressing shift, it won't let you go up or down. So you're just dragging where this starts. Let it fade in a little bit slower. We'll just listen to it. So I'll usually probably have it fade a little bit longer on the out too, just so that it kind of just fades very nicely out. Now we'll do that in the beginning as well. We'll just press shift before we click and then drag over. It can't go up and down. If you're not pressing shift, you can make it go up and down. So always be careful when you're doing that. I always like to make sure I'm pressing shift when I'm doing these kind of operations. You can press shift after as well and it won't let you. And then Final Cut also has safeties that when it sees that when you're dragging only to the left and the right, you don't have to be pressing shift. But I always do that as like an insurance that I cannot basically mess up when I have shift. It's something you have to do more in other editing programs, but in this editing program you don't have to do as much. But we'll just kind of check out that fade. That's an okay fade. We'll probably have it fade a little bit earlier, and that'll probably work for us. You always double check it. Let's double check it. Oh, that'll probably work for us. So that audio is ready to go. Now we'll basically go through our whole wedding and make sure everything is mixed that way. You want to make sure that everything sounds good and nothing overpowers anything else, and that you could hear everything the way that you want to as an editor and not be sloppy. That's the last thing you want to be as an editor, sloppy. You want to make sure everything that has audio looks good and sounds good. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to add the color correction. So color correction is going to be on a clip-by-clip basis. Now, something that I kind of want to bring up, whenever I'm shooting, I'm always using a color card. I can show you the color card. If we kind of just pull up a few clips, we can kind of see it probably pretty quickly. Let's go to master clips. It might be a little bit easier to find it. Here we go. Here's a color card. So I always use a color card to make sure that my color is perfectly balanced in camera. You can see that my skin looks perfectly natural. White is white, gray is gray, and black is black. Whenever I'm moving to a new location, I always do a color card. Like you can see, this one's a little bit too dark when I did it, but that'll let me adjust the colors in my camera. Make sure, and I saw that when I was doing the color card and adjusted it before I did these shots. You can see this one's a little bit too blue. I'm going to show you how to do color correction on this clip. But you can see for the most part, most of my clips will look already color corrected because I'm shooting everything with a color card beforehand. Anytime I'm switching locations, like you can see here, I switch locations and I have a color card to make sure that my color just stays completely natural. Anytime I'm switching locations, I will do a color card. This is kind of roughly in the same location, so I didn't do one. Before the ceremony, I do another color card. I'm always throughout the day just kind of checking my color, making sure to get an update on my color card. This is a manual white balance is what I'm doing. On the other side of this color card, there's a gray card. It's the same color as this middle gray. Basically, you're taking it's 16% gray or 32% gray. I forget exactly the percentage of gray, but it's the middle gray. It's what all cameras are designed and calibrated for. So when you're doing a white balance, you want to do it against this middle gray to get the perfect color out of your camera. That's how I'm able to get perfect color right out of the camera. I don't have to worry too much. I'm going to take off this so you can kind of see it. I don't have to worry too much about color correcting, things like that. I usually, during a wedding day, you can see this is pretty much almost perfect color and they match each other. I didn't do any corrections to this. You can look right at this clip. It'll show you right here if I've done anything. No, I have not done anything. This is how it was out of the camera. This is exactly what it looked like. So doing that color card will eliminate pretty much 98 to 99% of all your color problems. Now, you're always going to have little problems that spike up, like that dress that I just showed you. Let's just find it again. After I did the color correction, it just wasn't quite right after when I shot the dress. So this dress, you could see that the color is okay here, but it's a little bit too blue here. So what I'll do, I'm just going to kind of show you at the end of this timeline, just as an example. So at the end of this timeline, I'm just going to kind of slice in this clip. I'm just going to insert it right in. So let's take a look at this clip. I'm going to close the browser. I'm just going to leave the inspector and the viewer open, and I'm going to press Command 7 to open our video scopes. This is going to show us our video and all of our levels if something is too blue or too red. It's the first one that I like to look at. I always have everything available for me when I'm working. Some people like to only look at one. Some people like to look at all of them, maybe just 2, 3. It's really up to you. I like to look at all of them so I have a good reference of everything that's going on in my color in my video. Now, the first thing that I want to look at is my RGB parade. And this is telling me that my blue is a little bit too blue. You see how it's a little bit too higher on the bottom right here. If I look at the numbers, if I put this line over, you can see that the line, if I have a red on red, blue is a bit higher. That means that I have a little bit too much blue in my highlights. My blacks are not completely black. they have a little bit too much blue in them. Like you can see right here, it just looks a little bit too blue. And this shows me that. I'll look at my blacks right here. That's one of the first things I look at. I see that my blue is a little bit off. Then I look at my highlights. I put the line up here. My blue is a little bit too high. You can see it's a little bit too high. It's much higher than the green and the red. So that's not going to be a balanced color. I'm also going to look at my vector scope. Everything in the vector scope, like in all of the scopes, you want to be in the middle. You want everything to be even. This one is showing me everything is just moving towards the blue. This is the red area, this is the green area, like you can see from the border. It's indicating what color is dominant in this area. Everything is just moving more towards the blue, which shouldn't be happening. My exposure looks okay. The Luma scope is basically just for exposure. I may be a little bit too high. I'm at 3 instead of 0, but I'm fine with that. I don't necessarily always have to pick my my blacks. It's not necessarily my style to always be at 0, at least for my style of weddings. If I am color correcting for other people, I will always make it go to 0. Maybe right at 1. You don't want to lose any detail, so you play around with right around this area, not losing any detail and not making it go to -1. Basically, but if we want to correct it, let's just take a look how that would work. Now in the new Final Cut, you have a color corrector panel right here. Show the color inspector, so you can go right to that. The first one that I have shown are the color wheels. You can change that in the settings. It used to be just the color board. You have a few options here. There used to be just the color board. Now we have curves, we have hue and saturation curves. We have color wheels now, and the color curves, and obviously the color board that's always been there in Final Cut. So now when I want to adjust, I'm going to adjust the blacks, because it's a little bit the blacks of the blue. So I want to move the blacks, which are my shadows, from blue a little bit more into red, so that we can even that out a little bit and make it look a little more even on the scopes, make it look a little bit more in the center here. The vector scope should be more in the center. It shouldn't be bleeding into the blue. So let's take our adjustment. Basically, I'm going to move it to the red area, away from the blue area, away from where it's showing here, into the opposite direction, which would be somewhere around here. So it would be somewhere around here on this scope. Let's just move it too far. So now we can see our scope here on the red went too high. Let's bring it back down. So you can see where the blue starts going up. So we'll just play around with this and just kind of get it right perfect. And looking at the color, making sure it looks natural and not too green, because you can go into the green here too. So you want to kind of shift right and left if you have to not go green. And right there looks kind of natural, and it's right where we want to be on the color. So right now we have a much more balanced colors. Right here, it's a little bit higher on the red. So let's just bring it down. We can do that right here. And we'll just bring it down a little bit here. Some color, this is a very touchy spot right here, is probably very close to perfect. And like we can see, there's a little bit too much blue, so having it fare a little bit more to the red is probably what you want to do. But you can see everything is very close right here, very close. So now we're going to want to adjust our highlights. Our highlights are still a little bit too blue. So we'll go to our highlights and do the same thing. Now we can see we kind of moved a little bit closer. This is the skin tone line. We want to move a little bit more that way in our highlights. So let's just shift it over a little bit. And things can go a little bit too, you want to look at that dress. It wants to look the natural color. So you don't want to go too much. This is a very slight touch. Like you can see, it was only a little bit too blue. So right there is probably this is what it looked like before. You could uncheck here by the color wheels, this blue check. This is what it looks like with the correction. Without, with. We got rid of that little bit of blue, and we're a little bit closer here. Now, it's always going to be hard because the outside looks different than the inside, and that's fine. Now, usually what I'll do in this type of situation, I'll go down here into my effects, and I'm going to look for a little vignette. A vignette mask basically is going to lower this a little bit, make this a little bit less obvious. Let's just add that in. We'll just drag it right in from our effects. And this will kind of, we can blur the outside. You can see it kind of gets blurry more on the outside. Darkening as well, how dark it gets. The size. We want it to basically fall off away from the dress. and be very smooth. We'll click away so we can kind of see it, click away from the effect. And then it makes it a little bit less obvious I mean, that's really an artistic decision you might want to take. It might make the dark blues a little bit more blue, things like that. You could see it brings down the reds a little bit. I mean, that's really an artistic decision, but that's something you can do basically to lessen the effects of this blue on the outside. You're just going to take that on. And there's many other effects you can do to fix that as well. Now we're just going to get rid of this. This is more of an artistic decision, so we'll just get rid of it, and something that I've already done. So I'm going to Shift Z to zoom out. I'm going to go to the beginning. So that's kind of how color correction would work. You want to make sure everything looks good on those scopes. And you can see here, I'm going to show you kind of how the lighting would work. I like things to be very rich in brightness. 50 is the middle. Sometimes people like to always push their highlights all the way to 100. And you can see that here, how that would look. Sometimes that might be too bright for what you're going for. So I sometimes just like to keep things natural, keep that color a little bit in. This is more sometimes a creative decision than anything else. And sometimes when I'm adding my color grade, like you can see here, technically, according to my video scopes, is a little bit too low, but it is fine. It looks fine to the viewer. And sometimes things with style are not going to be perfect on the video scope, but you do want to make sure everything looks balanced and good and nothing looks a little bit too blue or too orange, things like that, that it does look natural. Here it looks very natural, and we are in the middle of our scope, kind of. We're going more towards blue because there's blue sky. That's always going to happen when you have more blue sky. Here, when we don't have as much blue sky, we're right in the middle. That's basically what you're always aiming for, to be right in the middle of your scope here, right in the middle of the Vectorscope, and everything kind of looks very close. There's a little bit more blue in this image, so you'll have a little bit more blue. That is very normal. When you have a little bit more of one color in the image, you're not going to try to color correct that all out. That's going to be opposite of what you want to do. You want it to make things look as natural as possible in the color correction process. And a lot of this is having a very good monitor. That's why I always use IMAX and Max. They calibrate the monitors in the factory to make them very good for video production uses, to make them very good for photography uses, so that everything looks very natural and balanced, so that when you're color correcting something on these monitors, it will look very good in the finished product when you print it or when you make a movie out of it, things like that. When you're editing on a cheap PC monitor, you're not going to have that advantage. That PC monitor has not been color corrected from the factory for color grading purposes, for color correction purposes. So you're going to have a lot more problems with this type of thing. So I would always suggest you can color calibrate a monitor though. There are things you can buy to color correct a monitor. I'm forgetting what the name of them are, but you basically put these things on your screen, and you have to be in the light brightness they usually color correct in, things like that. And then you can color correct the monitor to be good for color correction and photography and things like that. But Macs just come like that from the factory. There's the process that they do in the factory so that it looks good in any brightness conditions. And that's pretty much what you're paying for. That's why they cost a little bit more money. Now, the next thing we're going to go over is color grading. Now that we have all of our colors very balanced, everything looks natural, we're going to go to color grading. The way that I like to do that is adding an adjustment layer to the top. Now, Final Cut doesn't allow you to add adjustment layers. In the notes of this video, I'm going to include a website that basically has the instructions of how to add an adjustment layer to Final Cut Pro X. It basically is a very simple process. You go into Motion, you make a blank adjustment layer, you save it as a Final Cut preset, and then you import it into Final Cut so that you could use it here in your effects. You can see here when you go into the effects, you got to open your browser, and when you go into the effects, you have your titles and generators. It's going to be saved as a title, and you have adjustment right here. I have it saved as a different preset, and then I have my adjustment layer. This is basically a blank title that I could put anything on, and I add color to it. This is something that whenever you update Final Cut, you have to fix, because they basically break it every time the Final Cuts get update, or when you install Final Cut on a new system, you have to do this again. Your old projects are not going to work. You're going to have to redo the adjustment layer. The way that Final Cut has you do it is basically by doing a compound clip, but I like doing it this way because I feel like it's much easier to adjust, and it just works a little bit better the way I like to work. This is the way that basically Premiere Pro allows you to do adjustment layers, and it's the way that I've gotten used to doing it. And I've tried the composite clip method and it just doesn't work as good for me. So I like doing this. So we'll go, the way that I like to do it is basically doing an in and out point. So I'll go to the beginning of where I want to do it. I can just press up. So that's right where I want to start my adjustment layer. And I'll go to the end, function right, to go all the way to the end. And basically for the end, I don't want to include the way that I've been editing it. I don't want to include this title in the adjustment layer. I don't want to add any colors to that. So I'll go to the last frame where it fades out, where I can see things. So I'll go left, frame by frame right. That is the last frame. Right here is the last frame. So I'll put my out right there. And now I'll select my adjustment layer and I'm going to connect it to this timeline by pressing Q. And it'll go right to where I had my in and out points. So you can see it ended right here. Let's check to make sure it ended where I wanted it to end. And let's check that it started where I wanted it to start. And it did. It's perfectly aligned. Now you can see I want my adjustment layer to be underneath these effects that I added before. All of these effects, transition effects and things like that. The way that you do it is you press Shift and select it. And then when you press Shift, it won't let me drag it left or right. You have to be careful not to create a new timeline. And then you're just putting it underneath all those effects. When you're dragging it down, just be careful that you've kept the same position. So my position is still the same here on the last frame. And you can basically check very easily if your position is there at the beginning. So my adjustment layer hasn't moved. Now let's get rid of our browser a little bit, and let's get rid of our video scopes so we can see everything a little bit better. Now when I color grade, I like to do a few things. The first thing that I like to add is a film look. My standard film look that I like to add to make things look very much like film is Film Convert Pro. I'm going to include a link to that in the notes, in the description. Basically, Film Convert Pro is a very good preset. It makes everything, it changes everything camera by camera, so it's made for each camera that's popular in the market right now, and it'll move the camera's colors to make it look exactly like film, and it'll also add the film grain and everything to make it look like film, and the brightness adjustments as well. So we'll just drag this effect right into our adjustment layer, and when you add this effect, you have to adjust it. So we'll go here to our video adjustments. The first thing you have to do is make sure you have it on the right camera that you shot on. So the camera that I shot on was a Panasonic GH4. So I'll put Panasonic, go to GH4, and I shot it on the natural setting. You always want to make sure you shoot on one of these settings that they have basically here. Natural I very much like because it looks very natural, it looks very good, like you could already see. The stuff looks very good out of camera. We'll select natural. So now this has shifted everything to a film look to match the Kodak 5207 Vision 3 stock. There's many film stocks that it has here. I usually like the Fuji Eterna or Fuji Rio. Those are very much the ones that I like. It adds a very warm look to everything. It still keeps very nice skin tones, like you can see here. Everything still looks very nice. We can take it off and on so you can kind of see what it did. There's it off and then on. It kind of gives it a little warmer. It raises up the blacks a little bit. We can see something a little bit more black, so we can kind of keep an eye on that. So that's off, on. So it just warms everything up. It just warms everything up. Warm has always been seen as kind of a very loving color. Blue has always been seen as more of a cold color. So for weddings, I always like to err more into the warm. That's why I've chosen this warm preset. I like everything looking a little bit more warm in my weddings. It adds a little bit more of a style instead of looking the coldness that it did before. Now, I always like kind of leaving the film color and curve and grain pretty much the same. What you might want to do if the grain is bothering you, you lower the grain. Sometimes I've had a little bit better results lowering the grain to somewhere around 20, things like that, especially for internet compression, or it might look a little bit ugly when you're raising the grain a little bit. But really depends on you. If you're making your compression very good and you're exporting it the way that you should, 100 would be perfectly fine. And it would look more like film, what we're looking for. Now that that's done, we've added basically half of our color grade. Now everything looks a little bit different than it did before. It looks a little bit more romantic, and it looks more like film, like we wanted to. Now the next thing I'm going to do is zoom in. I'm gonna go to the beginning like we did before. I'm gonna add our in again. I'm gonna go to the end, go to that spot that we had on the adjustment layer, add our out. It's gonna be one more frame in. So you know, it's always gonna add one more frame after where you put. So right here would be perfect, like you could see the ending, but basically I had to put my out one frame before for it to be there. When I'm adding this next layer, you want that. Now when I'm adding the next layer, it's gonna be a layer of white. I'm gonna go here into my generators, and it's gonna be a solid generator and my whites. And I'm going to just connect a layer of white to where I've added my in and out. And this layer I'm gonna lower beneath, or actually I'll have it above my color correction right there, to make sure that it is still underneath all these effects and everything. We don't want to have this white affecting any of our effects. So now you can see everything is white. We don't want our whole wedding to look white like that. So my strategy for this, I usually like it either 1 or 2%. Right now it's set to 100%. So I like to have it right about 2%. And it'll add kind of a dreamy look to everything throughout the whole day. This makes it look a little bit more dreamy, like I said. Let's look at a shot of the bride and groom together right here. Now we'll take it off by pressing V, so you can see what it did. Now our blacks, you can see in her hair, it keeps anything from being black. Anything that was completely black, like right here, now has white in it. Let me take off this show OSC right here, which you can do by pressing right there. And you can just see it kind of adds a little bit of white to everything right there. Adds white, so nothing can look too white. Now you might decide that 1% is better, you might decide that you want a little bit more. Depending on where you're publishing it, it might not look right at 2%. Sometimes when you're publishing for the web, it looks a little bit less. That's why I have it at 2%, because I think it's a little bit more than I usually like it, but when I put it to the web, it looks perfect. So that's the other thing that I like to do as my color grading. Right there. And that basically is most of what I do to most of my weddings color grading. Sometimes I'll add a vignette like you saw me do, but sometimes I won't. It really depends on what I'm doing for that specific wedding. And I might change the color of the film emulsion right here and convert to what type of film I'm converting it to. Sometimes I might, the thing with Kodak is it's just a little bit more blue than Fuji, and it crushes the blacks a little bit more. Fuji, Real especially, just looks so nice, and Eterna as well. They look so nice in the blacks. RL just has a little bit more of the orange, which I like. It just makes everything look very nice throughout the day. It just brings that little bit of pop. It makes it look a little bit special. It brings a little bit of uniqueness that they're looking for their wedding. It doesn't look exactly like it did coming out of the camera, like you can see here. I'm gonna turn them off. This is what it looked like before coming out of the camera, and this is what I've added. I've added that look. It looks more like a movie now. That's basically what I do when I'm adding polish. When I'm adding polish to my audio and to my video to make the video and the audio look much better. Next week, what I'm gonna show you is how to export things to various formats. How to export to H.264, which is a popular format for viewing online, but H.264 has many different types. Vimeo has a flavor that they like more, and YouTube likes a little bit different. So next week I'm going to show you how to make and export your videos for specific formats and specific delivery avenues. Now remember to please subscribe if you like this video so that you'll get my video next week right when it's posted. And like this video and share it with your friends so that they can find out more about the Ninja Monkey Video School. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good week. Bye.